Amaka, overwhelmed by emotions, demanded custody of Fedora. The Uchis were taken aback by her sudden assertiveness. "I want custody of my child," Amaka declared, her voice firm and determined. "Amaka, that's not possible. We are her parents." "But I carried her for 9 months, so you can't just keep me away from her." The Uchis decided to refuse further visits from Amaka, fearing the situation was spiraling out of control. Amaka was a young woman from Umuahia, a town nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria. Life had never been particularly easy for Amaka, but she had always managed to get by. Her father had passed away when she was just a child, leaving her mother Ngozi to raise her alone. Ngozi worked as a petty trader, selling vegetables in the local market, and though they lived modestly, they were very content. As Amaka grew older, she took on various jobs to support her mother. She worked as a seamstress, mending and creating clothes for their neighbors. She also helped her mother with the market store. Despite their hard work, money was always tight, and luxuries were far and few between. But Amaka never complained. She was determined to make her life better for herself and for her mother. Then disaster struck. Ngozi fell seriously ill, and after many weeks of persistent coughs and fevers, she was diagnosed with a severe heart condition that required immediate surgery. The news hit Amaka like a thunderbolt. The cost of the surgery was astronomical, far beyond what they could afford at the moment. Amaka sold everything of value they owned, but it was still not enough. She sought help from friends and family members, including her relative and extended relatives, but everyone had their own burdens to bear. Amaka spent sleepless nights worrying about her mother. She watched as Ngozi grew weaker, her once vibrant spirit dimming under the weight of her illness. It was during one of these sleepless nights, as she sat by her mother's bedside, that Amaka made a decision that would change her life forever. She had heard stories about surrogacy, mostly whispered conversations among women in the market or snippets from the radio. Rural couples who couldn't have children would pay substantial amounts of money to women willing to carry their babies to term. It seemed like an unimaginable choice, but Amaka was out of options. She knew she had to do whatever it took to save her mother's life. The next morning, Amaka made her way to a nearby cafe in town. Amaka searched for agencies that facilitated surrogacy and found several in Lagos. One in particularly stood out: the Hope Surrogacy Services. They promised generous compensation and excellent medical care. With a mix of fear and determination, Amaka sent an email expressing her interest. Days turned into weeks, and just as she was starting to lose hope, she received a reply. The agency was interested and asked her to come to Lagos for an interview. Amaka felt a mix of relief. Lagos was far away, a bustling metropolis that was worlds apart from the quiet life she knew in Umuahia, but she had no choice because she felt like that was her only option. She borrowed money from a neighbor for the journey and left her mother in the care of a trusted friend. As the bus rumbled towards Lagos, Amaka's mind raced with the thought of what lay ahead. She had never been to Lagos before and had heard stories of its chaos and opportunities. The tall buildings and busy streets were a stark contrast to the familiar landscape of her own hometown. Upon arriving in Lagos, Amaka was overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. She made her way to the address provided by the agency. Clutching her bag tightly, Hope Surrogacy Services was located in a modern office building. The receptionist greeted her warmly and led her to a room where she met Dr. Okoro, a kind-looking man in his 50s. "Welcome, Amaka," Dr. Okoro said, offering her a seat. "I understand you are interested in becoming a surrogate." "Yes, sir," Amaka replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I need the money, and I really want to do this. Aside needing the money, I also want to help women who cannot carry their own children." Dr. Okoro nodded sympathetically. "We will take care of you, but you must understand this is a serious commitment. You will be carrying someone else's child, and there will be a legal agreement to ensure everyone's interests are protected." Amaka nodded. She understood the gravity of what she was about to do, but she was resolute. This is a serious commitment, and she knew she was ready for it. They went over the details of the contract, and Amaka learned that the couple she would be carrying the baby for were the Uchis, a wealthy family who had struggled with infertility for years. After the interview, Amaka returned to Umuahia, her mind made up. She would do this for her mother's sake. She signed the necessary documents, underwent medical tests, and was soon matched with the Uchis. It wasn't long before she was back in Lagos again, starting the medical procedures to prepare her body for pregnancy. The Uches were kind and grateful, though they maintained a professional distance. Mr. Uche was a successful businessman, while Mrs. Uche, known as Nneka, was a former banker who now devoted her time to charity work. They had everything money could buy, except the one thing they wanted the most, which was a child. As the embryo transfer procedure approached, Amaka felt a whirlwind of emotions. She was anxious about the process, hopeful for her mother's recovery, and curious about the life growing inside of her. She knew this journey would be difficult, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Amaka sat nervously in the sleek air-conditioned office of Hope Surrogacy Services. The modern surroundings, with their glass walls and minimalist furniture, made her feel out of place. She clutched her bag tightly, trying to steady her racing mind. Dr. Okoro, the kind-faced man who had conducted her interview, entered the room with a warm smile. He was accompanied by two lawyers, both dressed in sharp suits, carrying thick folders of documents. The atmosphere was serious, yet Dr. Okoro's demeanor was reassuring. "Good afternoon, Amaka," Dr. Okoro greeted her. "I hope you had a safe journey." "Yes, sir, thank you," Amaka replied, her voice betraying her nerves. "Please have a seat," he said, motioning to a comfortable chair at the long conference table. "We have so much to discuss." Amaka sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. The lawyers introduced themselves. They were the legal representatives of the Uchis, the wealthy couple who had chosen Amaka to carry their child. "We understand that this is a significant commitment," Mr. Adeyemi began, "and we want to ensure that you fully understand the terms of the agreement. The contract is designed to protect all parties involved, particularly in such a delicate and important arrangement." Dr. Okoro took over, explaining the medical procedures Amaka would undergo, the embryo transfer, the prenatal care, and the support she would receive throughout the pregnancy. He assured her that she would be in the best hand, with regular care and medical checkups, and access to top medical facilities. "As for the financial aspect," Mr. Adeyemi continued, "you will receive a substantial fee, which will be paid in installments throughout the pregnancy. This is in addition to covering all medical expenses and providing a comfortable living allowance." Amaka listened intently, her mind focused on her mother's face, pale and frail in the hospital bed. This was her chance to save her mother, and she would not let it slip away. "There is, however, one important condition. There will be no contact between you and the Uchis beyond the scheduled medical appointment. This is to ensure that the arrangement remains professional and to protect the privacies of both parties." Amaka nodded. She understood the need for boundaries, but a part of her felt uneasy. She had hoped to at least meet the couple whose child she would be carrying. Before she could dwell on this thought, the door opened and Nneka walked in, her presence commanding yet graceful. "Good afternoon, everyone," Nneka Uche greeted, her voice warm and confident. She was dressed elegantly, exuding an air of sophistication. "Mrs. Uche," Dr. Okoro said, standing, "we are just discussing the terms of the agreement." Nneka smiled and turned to Amaka. "You must be Amaka. I've heard so much about you." "Yes, ma," Amaka replied, standing up nervously. "It's nice to meet you." Amaka's eyes softened as she looked at Nneka. "I wanted to come and thank you personally for what you are doing for us. It is beyond words," Nneka said to her. Mr. Adeyemi cleared his throat, reminding them of the formalities. "Mrs. Uche, as we discussed, it is important to maintain a professional distance," he said. "I understand," Nneka said, not taking her eyes off Amaka, "but I feel a connection to her that I can't explain." Amaka felt a strange mix of emotion. She was touched by Nneka's word, but also confused. She had experienced this to be a clinical, detached process, yet there was this woman expressing her gratitude and warmth for just her doing her job. "Amaka," Nneka continued, "I know the terms are strict, but I want you to know that we deeply appreciate your sacrifices. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to us." Dr. Okoro stepped in, his tone gentle but firm. "Mrs. Uche, while your intentions are noble, it is crucial to adhere to the agreed terms. This ensures clarity and avoids any potential complications." Nneka sighed but nodded. "I understand, but I hope you know, Amaka, that you are not alone in this." Amaka nodded, feeling a sense of reassurance despite the formal settings. "Thank you very much, ma," she said. The meeting continued with the lawyers going over the final details of the contract. Amaka signed the necessary documents, her hands shaking slightly as she did. This was it. There was no turning back now. And before she left, Nneka approached her once more. "Take care of yourself. We are in this together. Do not forget." Nneka smiled. "I will, ma." As she walked out of the office, the weight of her decision settled on her shoulders. She was stepping into an unknown future, driven by love and hope. She prayed silently that it would be worth it after all, for her mother's sake and for the life that she was about to nurture within her. Against all professional advice, Nneka visited Amaka frequently. At first, she would arrive quietly, often bringing small gifts or homemade meals. Her visits were very unexpected, but Amaka quickly began to look forward to them. In those early days, the interactions were tentative, marked by polite conversations and shared silences. But as time passed, a genuine friendship began to blossom. Nneka would often sit by her side, listening to Amaka as she spoke about her life in Umuahia, her mother's illness, and her dreams for her future. In return, Nneka shared stories about her own life, her career, her marriage to Chike Uche, and the painful journey of infertility that had led her to surrogacy. "You know, I used to be a banker," Nneka said, her voice soft with nostalgia. "I loved the work, but after years of trying to have a baby, I decided to step back and focus on what truly mattered to me." Amaka listened, her heart aching for Nneka's struggle. "It must have been very difficult," she said quietly. "It was," Nneka said. "We tried everything, treatment, prayers, even adoption. But my husband insisted that he wanted the child to have his own blood or something to do with him. But nothing even worked, and then we found out about surrogacy. It was our last hope, and we decided to try it out." Despite the physical pain and emotional toll of the pregnancy, Amaka found comfort in their growing friendship. Nneka's visit became a source of strength and a reminder that she was not alone in the journey. As the days passed, Nneka confided more and more in Amaka about the countless doctors' visits and hope that would rise and fall with each failed attempt, and the toll it had taken on her relationship with her husband. Through it all, Her desires to be a mother had never wavered. Sometimes I wonder if we were meant to be parents, Nneka said one day, her voice tinged with doubt. You will be, Amaka said firmly. I can feel it. Those people will bring you so much joy. Their conversations often drifted from serious topics to lighter ones. They laughed together, shared favorite recipes, and even debated the names they liked for the baby. Amaka would suggest some Igbo names that carried beautiful meanings, while Nneka listened eagerly, making notes in a small notebook. What about Chimamanda? Amaka suggested one evening. It means my God will not fail. It is a strong name that is filled with hope. Nneka smiled. I would write it down. It sounds good. Despite the joy and connection these visits brought, Amaka's pregnancy was not without its challenges. She suffered from severe sickness that often lasted all days, and the days when she could barely keep any food down, and nights when she lay awake, discomfort coursing through her body. Even as months passed, their bonds grew stronger. Nneka was there for every milestone. When Amaka felt her baby kick, during the routine ultrasound scans, and even as doctor's appointments, she helped Amaka decorate a small room where she stayed, adding little touches that made it feel more like home. Despite the severe warnings from Dr. Okoro and the lawyers, Nneka's visit became a cherished routine. She didn't mind, and the boundaries set by the agreement began to blur as their friendship deepened. They supported each other through everything, finding a sense of family in the most unexpected circumstances. As the pregnancy progressed, new challenges arose. Amaka was placed on bed rest after experiencing early contractions. The doctor explained that it was a precaution to prevent preterm labor. Confined to her small room, Amaka felt frustrated and helpless, but Nneka remained a steadfast support to her. Finally, the day arrived. Amaka was admitted to the hospital, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. Nneka and Chike were there, holding their hands and offering words of encouragement. Amaka, you've got this, Chike said, his voice filled with gratitude. We are so grateful for everything. The labor was long and painful, each contraction a wave of agony that left Amaka gasping for breath. Nneka stayed by her side, never letting go of her hand, whispering words of comfort and strength. Breathe, Amaka, you're doing amazing. Just keep going. Hours passed and exhaustion set in. The doctors and nurses moved with practice efficiency. Their calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the turmoil Amaka felt. She pushed through the pain, driven by a fierce determination to bring the child into the world. Finally, with a last desperate effort, Amaka felt the baby slip free. The room filled with the sound of newborn's cry, a beautiful heartwarming sound that brought tears to her eye. It's a girl, a beautiful one, the doctor announced. Amaka's heart swelled with unexpected surge of love and attachment. As she gazed at the baby, this little life she had carried and nurtured for 9 months was now a reality, a living, breathing person. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and she touched the baby's soft cheek. The baby was placed in Nneka's arms, and Amaka watched as Nneka cradled her daughter for the first time. It was a moment of profound joy and overwhelming emotion. But amidst the joy, Nneka felt a pang of sadness within her. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet nothing could have prepared her for the depth of feeling that came with seeing the baby she had carried. The bond she felt was undeniable, a connection that went beyond the terms of their agreement. As she lay back, exhausted and emotional, Amaka couldn't help but wondered what the future held. She had given life to this child, and in doing so had formed a bond that she thought would never be broken. With the formalities concluded, Amaka received her balance, a substantial sum that would cover her mother's surgery and provide for their future. She packed her few belongings and returned to Umuahia, her heart heavy but resolute. The journey home felt longer than usual, each mile a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. When she arrived at the house, she shared with her mother, Ngozi, what was waiting for her. seated in a wicker chair on the balcony, her face lit up with a tired but genuine smile as she saw Amaka coming. "Welcome home, my daughter," Ngozi said, her voice frail but filled with love. "Thank you, Mama," Amaka replied, embracing her gently. "I have missed you so much." Over the next few weeks, Amaka threw herself into caring for her mother. The money she had earned allowed them to afford the surgery Ngozi desperately needed. The procedure was scheduled quickly, and Amaka stayed by her mother's side throughout the recovery process. She prepared nutritious meals, administered medication, and kept the house clean and comfortable for her mother. For some time, it seemed like things were finally improving. But despite their best efforts, Ngozi's health began to decline. The surgery had bought her time, but it wasn't enough. The illness, a relentless and unforgiving one, continued to sap her strength. Amaka watched helplessly as her mother grew weaker with each passing day. One night, as Ngozi lay in bed, her breathing shallowed and labored, she called to Amaka, "Amaka, my child." Amaka sat by her side holding her hand. "I'm here, Mama." Ngozi's eyes were filled with profound sadness and love. "You have been so brave, my child. You are so strong. Promise me you will take care of yourself after I'm gone." Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes. "Mama, don't talk like that. You will get better. We will get through this together." Ngozi smiled quickly. "Life is unpredictable, my daughter. But know that I am at peace because of you. You have made me proud." Amaka stayed by her mother's side throughout the night, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort. As dawn broke, Ngozi's breathing grew fainter. She passed away peacefully with Amaka by her side, her face serene and free of pain. Amaka was devastated. The loss of her mother was a blow that left her feeling hollow and alone. The house that had once been filled with warmth and laughter now felt cold and empty. She buried Ngozi in a small ceremony attended by a few close neighbors and friends. The community offered their condolences, but their words did so little to soothe the ache in Amaka's heart. In the weeks that followed, Amaka struggled to find sense of normalcy. She went through the motions of her daily life, but the joy and purpose she had once felt were all gone. She often found herself thinking about the baby girl she had given birth to, wondering what her life was like now. The memory of her daughter's tiny face and the delicate hand haunted her dreams. The days passed slowly, each one blending into the next. Amaka spent hours sitting in the small garden her mother had loved, her mind drifting back to the child she had given birth to. The connection was still undeniable, no matter how she tried. "I need to see her," Amaka said to herself one evening, her voice breaking with heavy silence. "I need to know that my child is okay." With a renewed sense of purpose, Amaka began to search for Nneka and the baby. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but the thought of reconnecting with them gave her the strength to move forward. Packing a small bag with essentials, she set off for Lagos, the bustling city where her journey had begun. The journey was long and arduous, but Amaka's determination never wavered. She arrived in Lagos with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The familiar sights and the sounds bringing back a flood of memories. She remembered the hospital, the small apartment where she had stayed, and the visit from Nneka that had filled her eyes with warmth and friendship. Amaka started her search by revisiting the hospital where she had given birth. She spoke to the nurses and staff, hoping to find some trace of the Uchis. Most of them were unable to provide any information, bound by confidentiality and professional discretion. However, a nurse remembered Nneka and pointed Amaka in the direction of the neighborhood where the Uchis lived. She begged Amaka not to reveal her identity, and Amaka tipped her, promising not to let anybody know she was the one who had given them the information. Grateful for the lead, Amaka navigated through the crowded streets of Lagos, her heart pounding with anticipation. She asked around discreetly, speaking to vendors, shopkeepers, and anyone who might have seen the Uchis. Her persistence paid off when a street vendor recognized the description of Nneka and directed her to a gated community. As she approached the gate, Amaka felt a surge of nerves. She had no plan, no clear idea of what she wanted to do or say if she had found Nneka, but the thought of seeing the baby, of reconnecting with the life she had brought into the world, gave her the courage to press on. "Excuse me," she said to the security guard at the gate, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm looking for the Uche family. They live here, don't they?" The guard's eyes, skeptical, but he nodded. "Yes, they do. What's your business with them?" Amaka hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I am just an old friend. I want to see them to congratulate them on the arrival of their baby." The guard made a call to confirm the story. He allowed her to enter, directing her to the Uchi's residence. Amaka's heart beat faster with every step, a mix of hope and fear swirling within her. When Amaka got to the house, she confronted Nneka and her husband Chike, demanding to see the child. Her heart pounded as she stood in the living room, the weight of her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Nneka, Chike, I need to see her. I can't explain it, but I have to be a part of her life," Amaka said, her voice trembling with intensity. The Uchis were so shocked. Chike exchanged a worried glance with Nneka before turning back to Amaka. "We understand how you feel, Amaka, but we have to think about what's best for Fedora," he said cautiously. Despite their initial hesitation, the Uchis agreed to let Amaka visit. The first visit was tentative, filled with polite conversations and guided smile. But as the visit continued, something began to change. Amaka's love for the baby grew with each interaction, her bond with baby Fedora deepening in ways that she couldn't imagine. Amaka would sit with Fedora, playing with her, telling her stories, and watching her sleep. She fed her, bathed her, and do all the nice things to her. The little girl's giggles and bright eyes brought a joy to Amaka's heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. Each visit made it harder for her to leave, the attachment she felt tugging at her soul. Nneka and Chike found themselves caught into a whirlwind of emotions. Their gratitude for Amaka was immense, but so was their fear of losing their daughter, the one they had longed for. "We have to be careful," Chike, Nneka said one evening, her voice filled with concern. "Amaka is becoming more attached to Fedora every day. I am afraid of what might happen." Chike sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Nneka. I feel it too, but we can't just cut her out like that." The couple's conversation grew more frequent, their discussion often ending in frustration and worry. They wanted to do what was right for Fedora, but the path forward was unclear to them. As the days turned into weeks, the situation became more strained. Amaka couldn't help but feel the weight of the Uche's worry, their reluctance to fully embrace her presence in Fedora's life, a constant reminder of the fragile nature of their agreement. A few days later, things took a turn for the worse. Amaka, overwhelmed by emotions, demanded custody of Fedora. The Uches were taken aback by her sudden assertiveness. "I want custody of my child," Amaka declared, her voice firm and determined. Chike's expression hardened. "Amaka, that's not possible. We are her parents." "But I carried her for 9 months, so you can't just keep me away from her." The Uches decided to refuse further visits from Amaka, fearing the situation was spiraling out of control. They contacted their lawyers to make legal actions to protect their family. Nneka and Chike sat down that night, their hearts heavy with the weight of their decisions. "This is all my fault," Nneka said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got too close to her during the surrogacy journey. I should have listened to you all." Chike shook his head. "No, Nneka, we couldn't have known it would come to this. We have to protect Fedora now. She's our daughter, the one we had longed for." The next time Amaka came to visit, she was met with a cold reception. "Amaka, we've decided that it's best if you do not come around anymore," Chike said firmly. "You signed an agreement. Kindly keep to it." Amaka's eyes widened in shock. What? You can't possibly do this. Amaka's anger boiled over. You can't keep me from my daughter. I will fight this to the end. The situation escalated quickly, and the Uchis contacted their lawyer, who advised them to file a restraining order against Amaka. Tensions reached a peak when Amaka, in a moment of desperation, threatened to take Fedora away. The police were called, and Amaka was arrested for threatening the peace of the Uchis family. She was led away in handcuffs, tears streaming down her face. This isn't over, Amaka cried. I will fight for her. I will fight for my baby. I will fight for my child. It was a rainy Tuesday when the revelation came. The sky was grey, mirroring the heavy tension that had settled over Lagos since Amaka's arrest. Amaka sat in a small apartment, staring at the rain running down the windows. Her heart ached from the loss of her mother and the ongoing struggle to be a part of Fedora's life. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Amaka Owonsu, a tall man in suit, asked, holding a stack of papers. Yes, that's me, Amaka replied, her voice tired. The man handed the papers. These are the court documents. You are required to appear in court for the custody hearings. Your case have been reviewed and there are new developments. Amaka took the papers with shaky hands. New development? What do you mean? The man gave her a sympathetic look. I can't discuss the details with you here, but you should review these documents carefully. Amaka closed the door and sat down at her table, the rain tapping rhythmically against the window. She opened the papers, her eyes scanning through the legal jargon until she saw the key details. The surrogacy agreement has been reviewed, revealing that Amaka's Wonsu eggs was used in the process, making her the biological mother of Fedora Uche. Amaka's heart raced. She could barely believe what she was reading. So I am Fedora's biological mother, she whispered to herself. The realization hit her like a wave. All along, she had thought she was just a surrogate, but now it was clear that she was also Fedora's mother. The new revelation gave her hope, but it also stirred up a storm of emotions. Her phone rang, breaking the silence. It was her lawyer, Mr. Okeke. Amaka, have you seen the court document I sent to you? He asked. Yes, I have, she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. Good. The situation has changed, Mr. Okeke said. Because you are the biological mother, the court must now consider your claims to custody. However, this doesn't mean the process will be easy. The Uchis would fight to keep Fedora, and it will be an intense legal battle. Amaka's hand trembled as she spoke. So what do I do now? You need to prepare for the hearing. Gather evidence of your relationship with Fedora and be ready for a tough fight, Mr. Okeke advised. The weight of his words settled over Amaka. The prospect of a legal battle was daunting, but the chance to be in Fedora's life gave her a renewed sense of purpose. As Amaka prepared for court, the Uchis were also grappling with the news. They had hoped the surrogacy agreement would protect them, but this new twist had thrown everything into chaos. Nneka paced back and forth in the living room, her hands wringing together. Chike, I can't believe this is happening. How did we miss this detail? Chike looked equally distressed. We followed all the legal procedures. How could we not have known that Amaka's eggs were used? Nneka sat down heavily on the sofa. We have to fight for Fedora. Oh. We can't let her go. Chike sat beside her, trying to stay calm. We will need to hire the strong lawyers, someone who can argue our case and keep Fedora with us by all means. They began searching for the best legal representation they could find. Their new lawyer, Mrs. Adebayo, was a formidable figure in the legal field. She was sharp and confident, her reputation for winning tough cases preceding her. At their first meeting with Mrs. Adebayo, Nneka and Chike were full of anxiety. Mrs. Adebayo, what are our chances of keeping Fedora? Nneka asked, her eyes pleading. It will be a hard fight, but it is not impossible. We need to prove that you are the best parent for Fedora and that her well-being will be at risk if she is moved. Chike nodded. We will focus on demonstrating the stability and love you provide for Fedora. Mrs. Adebayo added. We would also argue that Amaka's claim is based on emotional ties rather than legal rights. With their legal strategy in place, the Uchis prepared for the court hearings. The days leading up to the court date were filled with tension. They spent hours with Mrs. Adebayo, going over evidence and rehearsing their testimonies. Meanwhile, Amaka was also busy preparing. She collected photos of her visit with Fedora, wrote down her memories of the time she had spent together, and tried to gather witnesses who could attest to her love for the child. Every evening, she reviewed her notes and tried to stay focused on the goal of being a part of Fedora's life. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. Amaka stood outside the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained, casting a grey light over the city. She took a deep breath and walked inside. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was very tense. The Uches and Amaka took their seats on the opposite sides, the divide between them stark and visible. Mrs. Adebayo and Mr. Okweke took sides beside their clients, ready to represent their cases. The judge entered and everyone stood up, and as they sat down, the judge looked at both parties and began the proceedings. The hearing was a grueling experience. Amaka took the stand first, her hands trembling as she spoke about her journey and her bond with baby Fedora. "I carried Fedora for 9 months," Amaka said, her voice breaking with emotions. "I felt her move inside of me. I loved her from the very moment I knew I was pregnant. She is my daughter, not just a child I carried for someone else." Her words were heartfelt, but they were met with legal arguments from Mrs. Adebayo. She countered by emphasizing that the surrogacy agreement was clear and that Amaka's emotional claims did not override the legal contract. Throughout the hearing, Nneka and Chike watched with a mix of hope and dread. They were determined to keep Fedora, but worried about the outcome of their trial. The back and forth argument, the legal jargons, and the emotional testimonies took a toll on them. After several hours, the judge adjourned the court session, announcing that the case would continue on another day. The Uches left the courtroom, their face lined with worry. As Amaka walked out of the room, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She knew that the battle was far from over, but the revelation that she was Fedora's biological mother had given her a fighting chance. The day of the final court ruling was bright but chilly. The sun shone through the courtroom windows, casting long shadows on the floor. The courtroom was filled with people, both lawyers, reporters, and onlookers, all eager to the outcome of the case that had captivated many in Lagos. Amaka sat nervously in the gallery, her heart beating very fast. She wore a simple dress, her eyes focused on the front of the room, where the judge sat behind the large wooden bench. Mr. Okeke, her lawyer, sat beside her, his expression serious but encouraging. Nneka and Chike sat at the other side of the courtroom, their faces tense. The judge, a stern-faced man, looked over his notes and addressed the room. "We are here today to review the case of Amaka Wonsu versus the Uche family. The issue at hand is the custody of the child known as Fedora Uche. I have reviewed all evidences and listened to testimonies from both parties. I will now deliver my verdict." Amaka's hands trembled as she held onto the edge of her seat. Her lawyer gave her a reassuring nod. Chike squeezed Nneka's hands, his face masked with worry. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak. "It is clear from the evidence presented that Amaka Wonsu is indeed the biological mother of Fedora Uche, according to the report of the DNA test. The fact has also been established through medical records and expert testimony." Amaka's heart leaped at the acknowledgement of her biological connection to Fedora. Tears filled her eyes as she thought about the long journey that had led to this moment, but the judge's next words brought her back to reality. However, the surrogacy agreement between the parties was clear and legally binding. The judge continued. "The contract stipulates that the Uche's family is the legal guardian of the child, and this agreement is upheld by the court." Nneka and Chike exchanged relief glances. They had hoped for this outcome, but hearing it confirmed that there was still a weight off their shoulders. Amaka's face fell as she heard the judge's ruling. She tried to hold back her tears, knowing that this was not the outcome she had hoped for. Despite the ruling in favor of the Uchis, the judge's next statement offered a glimmer of hope for Amaka. Although the legal agreement is binding, the court recognizes the deep emotional bond between Amaka Wonsu and Federal Uche. Therefore, I am granting Amaka Wonsu a regular visitation right to maintain her relationship with Fedora. A murmur of surprise and relief rippled through the courtroom. Amaka's eyes widened in astonishment. She had not expected the judge to grant her this opportunity. Mr. Okeke leaned closer to Amaka, his voice low. This is a significant concession. It is not full custody, but it is a start. Amaka nodded, her tears now a mixture of sadness and joy. Thank you, she whispered. The judge continued. The details of the visitation schedule will be worked out between the parties with the help of a mediator. Both sides must work together to establish a plan that is in the best interest of the child. With the ruling delivered, the judge left the courtroom. The tension in the room began to dissolve as people stood and began to leave. The outcome was not what Amaka had hoped for, but the chance to see Fedora was a small victory for her. After the court's decision, Amaka began to embrace her new reality. She had to accept that she wouldn't have full custody of Fedora, but she was grateful for the chance to be a part of her life through regular visits. Amaka packed her belongings and went back to Umuahia. Her heart, a mixture of sadness and hope. The familiar sight of her hometown brought her comfort, even though the memories of her mother's death still lingered. She settled into her small house, focusing on her store. One day, while on her way to her store, Amaka met a wealthy man named Chinedu Obi. He was kind, understanding, and they quickly grew close. Their relationship blossomed, and after a few months, Chinedu proposed to Amaka. They had a very beautiful wedding in Umuahia, surrounded by friends and family. Amaka felt a deep sense of joy and hope for the future as she started this new chapter in her life. Sometimes, her relationship with Chinedu helped her take her mind off Fedora for a while, and she was happy about it, knowing that visitation right was not legal custody. Not long after their marriage, Amaka became pregnant and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Kelechi. Chinedu and Amaka were overjoyed with their new son. Every 6 months, Amaka traveled to Lagos to visit Fedora. She cherished this visit, bringing little gifts and spending time with her daughter. Fedora recognized her and they shared happy moments together, even though their time together was very limited. Meanwhile, Nneka and Chike decided to adopt twin babies, a boy and a girl. They named them Flourish and Francis. The adoption process went smoothly and they welcomed the twins into their home with love and excitement. As the years passed, Amaka continued to build her life in Umuahia, finding joy in her work, her family, and her visits with Fedora. She was content with the life she had created and looked forward to the future. Nneka and Chike enjoyed their growing family. With Fedora, Flourish, and Francis, they were a source of joy and laughter. They found happiness in the children and ensured to spend quality time with them. And so, life moved forward, each of them finding their own path to happiness and to long-time fulfillment. This story teaches us that love and sacrifice can lead to profound connections and growth. Amaka's choice to become a surrogate for the Uche family, despite her own struggles, shows that true love often involves difficult decisions. The story reveals that relationships are complex, and respecting boundaries is so crucial to maintaining peace and trust. Through Amaka's journey from grief to acceptance, we learn that new beginnings are possible after hardship. Ultimately, the story encourages us to embrace love, navigate relationships with care, and remain hopeful for the future. Thanks for watching this captivating story on African stories and folktales. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories. Thank you.